We're going to start in just about 2 minutes. If you want to freshen up your lemonade glass and grab another hot dog and a dish of popcorn, get your vocal cords ready because we're going to be starting with Take Me Out to the Ball Game. When you're talking, you'll need to hold this up fairly close.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'll fade out.
What's the order? We don't have the round table.
Better, huh?
You're going to just each make your presentation.
Was that you there this morning early?
No, I should go last because I'm
Yeah, we're going to go, Richard.
Sounds good. So that won't be a question and answer deal then. That comes later.
The only thing we're missing with our popcorn maker is the monkey grinder that goes along the...
Well, what about
Because you're not the monkey grinder.
What about the beer vendor?
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Said a bad thing. No, I don't think it is.
I want to welcome everybody this afternoon to our History of Baseball in Lincoln County. We've got three of our younger men here today to talk. Richard Peterson's only 96, I believe it is, or about to be 96. Junior Sorenson, who's 89, pushing 95. And Dan Metz is the kid of the group. He's only 81.
Got that one.
Yeah, I had to add one.
He's
He's got to be the oldest. He's the only one walking with a stick.
Yeah. He's used to a ball bat, and he just can't not
Yeah,
have a stick
I
in his
wanted
hand.
authenticity. That's what I'm striving for.
When we're finished here, why you're welcome to walk around the museum and look at things if you haven't been here in a while. And we have on the walls, you can see our baseball uniforms displayed. A large picture of, I think that's the 1948 team, the Lincoln Hawks team from 1948 that were a championship team. And on the table are several items, and I really invite you to come up and look at them. Terry Lilac brought them over from the Sylvan Grove Museum, and there's some very interesting baseball historical items here. Do we have any catchers in the crowd? Anybody's ever played catcher? One there. Georgie, raise your hand. You played catcher.
Yeah, drilling my right arm.
Yeah, and your knees. Well, this is, back in the day, whatever day that was, this is one of the very first face masks that catchers would wear.
We couldn't afford one.
Yeah, they just took some chicken wire and put something together. And then everything advanced, and you had one of these that protected the top of your nose and your eyes. Of course, you look at the catchers today, and they're wearing hockey masks, so they're very well protected. And some very old-time pictures here, some early 1900s, 1912, and then getting a little more modern. But very interesting history up here. And right here, has anybody in here heard of Satchel Paige? Lots of arms go up. He was one of the two best Negro League pitchers of his era, and he did finally, after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, he did get into the major leagues later in the 50s, and he pitched clear up till he was 60 years old. The last few years was not in the major leagues, it was barnstorming. And he joined the Salina Blue Jays, and back in 1960, they had a very good semi-pro team. And they came up and played Sylvan Grove, who got a lot of people. The scorebook is here. When you read down there, about half of them are from Vesper, and then Sylvan Grove and Lincoln. And they played against him. He pitched 5 innings, gave up 5 runs. My wife's uncle, Ben Sheldon, the younger brother of her dad, hit a home run off of him. At least that's what he said. I talked to him at about noon today just to confirm, and he said, yeah, that was the highlight of the whole game for everybody. So, and I'm sure other people had the highlight as well. But he was a big draw. People came from lots of miles around to watch Satchel Paige pitch, and he pitched in our county at Sylvan Grove at the ball field down there. And some other memorabilia here that we'll get to in just a moment. But first, a 1, a 2, and a 3. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I never get back, and it's root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. And Commissioner, you're in trouble now because you didn't sing. Boy, it's going to go in the paper.
I'm anti-baseball.
You're anti-baseball. He's not American. Okay. Give me a name again.
Ryan Hageman.
Yeah, Ryan Hageman is our current Legion coach. So we're going to start there and then go back to ancient history and come forward.
Don't mind my uniform that I got. I'm on my lunch break. I'm the jailer at the sheriff's office, but I'm also the high school assistant baseball coach and the Legion coach for our summer team. And I did bring some of our current uniforms. This first one right here is the one that we currently wear. We've had these for about 2 years. So these are fairly new. And these are what we wear now. The one in the middle, the powder blue one, we had about 5 years ago. And we decided we wanted to kind of go with an older look on that, and we thought it was pretty neat with the color and that and the font. So, and then Hawks, yes, we are the Lincoln County Hawks. So as most of you know, and then the other one over there, that one I think was originated in the 2000s. I know when my wife and I moved here, that was the first jersey that one. When I was the coach, that was what we had. So, and then the hats; those are the matching hats that went with them.
Yeah.
And so, just a little bit about a little bit about me. I moved here in 2011 and started coaching here at the high school in 2013, and then we co-opted with Sylvan in 2014, and still coaching. So, baseball is my passion. I love it. Love enjoying working with those kids and seeing them improve every day, and glad I'm coaching the summer team, and glad that we're able to keep a Legion team around this area because it's important. There's a lot of Legion teams. Baseball now is pretty different. There's a lot of things factoring into that kind of with the Legion programs, and so it's always good if we can keep that program alive and
Tell them where you get kids from.
and keep it going here. And
Tell them where all you get kids from.
so yeah, where we get kids from is we get kids obviously Lincoln County. So that's Lincoln, Sylvan, anyone in Lincoln County, and I even branch out. I branch out into Ellsworth. I've had Ellsworth kids, Minneapolis kids, and I've had some Bennington kids that have wanted to come and play for our program. So definitely an exciting thing, and glad to continue it, and we're going to keep it going. So,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you. Now we're going to go back to ancient history for a little program, and once these 3 youngsters have given their pitch, then we'll just have a little round table and you can ask some questions, and they won't answer them probably, but you can sure ask them, or they'll give you an answer, just don't know how real it'll be. Anyway, back in, I just heard this yesterday, and it was in the mid-1860s, the first double play in Major League Baseball occurred. And date-wise, it was the date of yesterday's date. And that's why they were talking about it. And our oldest member here, Richard Peterson, didn't play. He wasn't part of that. But he was the bat boy on the team back then. So, Richard, why don't you talk a little bit about the early Denmark ball clubs and just whatever you want to say about baseball.
Well, we played.
Get it up a little closer. No, just get it up closer to your mouth. There you go.
Played Sunday afternoon. Well, we had a league of, I don't remember, Denmark, Bullfoot, Elkhorn, Barnard, who else?
Westfall.
Yeah,
That's about it, I guess.
there was 7 of them. There was 17.
Had 17, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Sure they weren't all. But we played on Sunday afternoon, different places every Sunday. We had a good team, but the idea was having fun.
What did you play, Richard?
Okay, Junior.
Hey, Richard,
Wants to know what position you
what
play.
did you play? What position did you play?
Richard was a catcher, a good catcher.
Yeah, what position did you play? Were you you were the catcher, right?
I can't hear.
Get up where you, yeah.
My hearing is bad.
Yeah, what position did you play?
Oh, I was catcher.
He's got hearing aids coming at the
I
end of
played a
it.
few other games. That was kind of like a cat once in a while.
Okay, yeah, get up a little closer there. What was the
Basically, I was catcher.
what were the ball diamonds like back then?
Oh, just a dirt field here and there. We played up on Bob Nelson, a mile north of Denmark. Out west of Merrill Nelson, west of Denmark. In between the store and downtown Denmark, we had a diamond there at one time. So I guess that was that.
Okay.
Besides that.
Okay, let Junior spin some yarns for us, Junior.
I got so much stuff to say you can't hear it all. But anyway, this county league that they formed right after the Second World War was really, really a good thing. I'll tell you what, people come from every place. You had your old 10-gallon water jugs and you had a dipper, you didn't have nothing, you know, but we played and we played hard. I don't care if it was 100 degrees or what it was. And we liked every bit of it. But old Richard was one of our main catchers, and he was good. He was good. And I'm going to tell you something else. Back when we was playing ball, I can name quite a number of boys that could have made the major leagues if they would have had the opportunity. If they just had the opportunity, had the right people. And nobody, you know, you was just you and you was you.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had a younger sister, Rosie. And me and Rosie, we played ball winter and summer. We had an old hayloft we played in the winter time, and when the electricity finally come through, we played on a yard light. And poor old Rosie, she's down here at Enterprise in a nursing home. And I try to see her about once a month, and I think of her a lot. And she was a good ball player. When we went to grade school at Denmark, she was one of our main ball players. You know, the boys and the girls played together. But old Rosie, we talk about it once in a while. And I just think it's wonderful to have somebody that a couple years younger, and we played. We didn't have ball gloves, or we didn't have, everything was barehanded. But anyway, whenever we got bigger, we got out of grade school. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to go to high school. But anyway, it was about 2 weeks before school started. And my mother come up to me and she says, you know, them people at Vespa, they play ball, you know. I said, oh, they do? Yeah, they play ball in high school. So anyway, we kind of looked into that thing, and that's the only reason that I went to high school. Right. But anyway, I've often thought about that, you know. She tricked me. But anyway, I got another one. I just got to tell people. I've never said nothing. We got into this national baseball game down at Wichita in 1948 or 9, and they matched us up with Columbus, Kansas, and that's where the Mantles come from. And old Mickey Mantle was there. He had already signed with the Yankees, but he had twin brothers. He was a year younger than him, and they was playing. And I met old Mick. He was there at one of them games. But anyway, it went on later and later and later. When I got in the Navy, whenever our ship would be anywhere on the East Coast, I would try to go to the Yankee Stadium. And old Mick, he recognized me. And he even let me come out on the field and play catch with him and old Yogi Bear and them guys. And it was quite a thing. Never ever thought about getting an autograph. Never thought about taking a picture. And this went on about one whole summer. I went down there 3 or 4 times, and it was really something, really something. But anyway, old Mick, he always told me, he said, anytime you get to Commerce, Oklahoma, go visit the folks. And you know, I've been down there 2 or 3 times, and they have nothing. They have nothing. They didn't. It's a little old town about half the size of our town. But anyway, they didn't keep no museum. They had no money. The only thing they got is a little statue at the high school of old Mick. But anyway, I always felt real bad about that. I never, you know, I thought maybe they'd have a little museum or a little something over old Mick. But anyway, these guys right here in that big picture, it was a good bunch of ball players. I tell you what, we usually tried to play 3 games a week. That one year, I remember we played 38 games that summer. And Lovey Hall kept all the records, and nobody knows whatever happened to any of it. Nobody knows. It got destroyed or disappeared or something. And he had good records. Every game, ever. He come to me one time, and he said, I struck out one time. We about the middle of the season. He said, you know, that was the first time you struck out. And I don't, you know, but he kept them kind of records. He knew what everybody done. I played a little ball against that guy right there. He was kind of a left-hander, and he throwed kind of a funny-looking ball. It's kind of crooked. But I also remember playing against Dan. You remember that, Dan?
What's that?
I remember playing against you.
Oh, yeah, and with me.
Well,
with us.
Hey, Junior, hold the microphone closer to your mouth. There you go.
You was with the Legion.
Yes.
And they was trying to raise a little money, and they gathered up a whole bunch of us guys, and Dan was pitching. And I remember, oh God, we can get him, you know, he's just a kid, got him no problem. But old Dan was tough. But anyway, I played one year up at Sylvan Grove. And I don't know if you people remember old Raymond Miller. But old Raymond helped me play ball more than, probably as much as anybody I know. You know, Raymond was a good fella. He had a few problems, but he was a good person to be around. But anyway, then I come down here and played with these guys here in Lincoln for a couple, 3 years. And when I come back from the Navy, I didn't care to play anymore. I just didn't. It was kind of out of me. But I did play a little softball when I was in the Navy. We had a little team on our ship. Whenever we'd meet somebody, well, we'd have a little game. But that's kind of the history of mine. Another thing, I got to tell you another thing. Probably the most thrilling thing ever happened to me in my life. We was in this, they invited me to come down to throw out the first pitch a few years ago. And yeah, I'd do that. Anyway, I was out on the mound. There was probably 8,000-10,000 people in the stands, and there was a lot of commotion. But anyway, the announcer, he was telling stories and telling things about things we'd done and whatnot. And pretty soon I heard this little old lady coming out of the stand. She come down to the gate, and she opened the gate, and here she comes, out on the field. And it was my older sister, Jenny. She lives at Lindsburg. And she drove, she's 95 years old then. She drove her little old car to Wichita, to the ballpark, and here she comes. I just couldn't understand it. But that was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me.
She was another pretty good ball player.
Oh, Jenny was a good ball player. Jenny was a good ball player.
Yeah.
Her and old Helen Flaherty and them girls, they had the best softball team in the country. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Okay, thank you.
This isn't what I'm going to tell you later, but while everything is fresh here with Junior, I want to ask him where he got his nickname, Boomer.
Well, when you went to Vesper High School, everybody got a nickname. I don't care who you was. And old Al Boldy. You people remember Alfred Boldy?
Sure.
He was kind of our coach, and he was an instigator. But that's where it kind of comes from.
Do you need this, or can you hear Junior? You can hear him, okay.
Well, thanks, Junior. We knew you as Boomer, as guys that were looking up to that team up there, hoping we would even go halfway as far as they went. And Junior was the leader, and he was Boomer because he hit him over the depot.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody in Lincoln that remembers the day remembers the depot. Of course, it's not there anymore. But the target of every right-handed batter would be to hit one over the depot, and I saw him hit a lot of them over the depot.
Let me have that thing. Anyway, you people remember Dean Thompson, the school teacher up here forever. But anyway, whenever the kids got a little rowdy, he would always tell them the story. He said one time when I was batting, I hit one over the depot and it hit one of them tanks. And that tank was empty, and it was Sunday night, real still. Boom! You could hear that ball hit that tank. Anyway, he always told me, he said that was the only thing. Sometimes he'd keep them kids under control, would tell them that little story. But anyway, they had a house out in right field down here, big old house. There ain't no house there no more. But that was another object. Hit that old house.
Now we all know where the Boomer came from, and I knew it had something to do with his skills in the batting box. That right field thing, that house was gone when I played, but I was a left-handed batter, and one of my favorite memories was I hit one over into the rodeo grounds.
Yep.
And I won't say who it was, but the umpire, and how he came up with this, but he called it a ground rule double. Now, I don't know whether the fence was down or what, but I still think about it.
You got robbed.
I got robbed. It wasn't the only time. Well, thanks, Junior and Richard. I confess to being the rookie in the group. And thanks to Bud, you did take 1 year away from me. I like that part, because any ones that we can pass on without having, that's good for me. They're coming too fast. I have some personal things to make mention of, and I hope it's okay. I don't want to take time away from the session that will bring Junior and Richard back in for questions, but I will share some personal things, because my baseball, which has been with me, what I now say, all my life, although of course there were a few early years that it wasn't, started here in Lincoln County, in Lincoln, Kansas, where I was born and raised. And I love seeing the Songer boys here, because they know a little bit about what I'm talking about, because they were in it on themselves. But my first memory of organized baseball was when I was a peewee, or maybe less than a peewee. But anyway, I was tagging along with the cookie team. And we were in Sylvan Grove. And of course, I didn't start or even come close to that. But there came a time in the game, I don't know whether we were way far ahead or way far behind, doesn't matter, probably behind, but there came a time to clear the bench. So, Dan, come up here, you're gonna bat. Oh, wow. Guess who was pitching? And when I mention this, you'll understand why I was fearful. Dale Waller. Dale Waller was on the mound for the Sylvan Grove team. And of course, he had a fastball. The only one that I would ever compare him with later on was Wayne Wilson, that played with Junior, and he had a fastball, and Dale was terrific. So I took my mandatory 3 strikes, and then went back to the bench. Well, the story isn't quite over. They had me assigned to the obligatory right field. Of course, that's where the rookies always started out, because they figured that's going to be the last action. So I moseyed out to right field when the bottom half of the inning came out, and got there. Unfortunately, and they didn't get any ground balls, but or fly balls to right field. But I got worse. When I moseyed back in after we got 3 outs, Ted Metz appears on the scene. And he said, I don't ever want to see you walk to right field like you had the whole world by the tail. You run. And that's when I learned the word hustle. and did I learn it forever. I've been a hustler on the baseball field ever since, and certainly have required that of any team I was associated with. You'll find out I was with helped with the Legion and other teams, and the number 1 rule is you don't mosey. You run out to your position and you run back. You know, I learned it the hard way, but I learned it. Another memory that I want to share is, and I probably have too many memories here to share, so I'll skip along. My first World Series that I remember was the 1945 Tigers versus the Cubs. And we listened to that on the radio over at my granddad Dodd's. You know where they lived. I think there's people here that's where Beth and Randy Schrader live now. That was my grandparents' house, my mother's parents. And we listened to the Tigers play the Cubs. But the next World Series that I remember was 1948, which involved the St. Louis Cardinals and the Boston Red Sox. And I had become, well, I hadn't yet. This is the point of the story. My Aunt Minnie, just like Junior's family, would die hard baseball. And she allowed to have the game during this, of course, was in October. And she let the game run, and we could listen to it on the radio. That's what a fan she was. And after the game, a particular game that we listened to, she kind of went around and she came to my desk. She was my teacher at that time, and she said, Daniel, who are you for? And, I said, well, I think probably the Red Sox, they sound pretty good. She said, Daniel, you need to know the Metzes are Cardinal fans. So she got me straightened out big time, and I became a Cardinal fan, not just because of Aunt Minnie's direction, but it seemed like the right thing to do. And I was a Cardinal fan for the rest of my life until Kansas City came along, and then I pretty well shifted my loyalties. But I got another story about the Cardinals, and Lynn can chime in on this if she feels like it. When I was in law school, I had a friend who was a die-hard Dodger fan. And this was 1960, 68. And he had said, he had a job all lined up with the legal department of Pizza Hut. And he said, I think I'll be able to get World Series tickets with my job. And I said, well, if you get them, and your Dodgers don't get in, which they won't, I want to rub it in on you a little bit, then you might get them to me. I'll go and see the Cardinals play, if they get in. And there was no uncertainty there. But anyway, fast forward, my dad and I had a case that took us up to Osborne. And it was the first day of the World Series, or going to be the first day of the World Series. It was going to start the next day. And when we got back from our Osborne work, had a message from our secretary, Arlene Schlappy. Most of you might remember her. She was Dad's secretary, and she was hanging on with me there. And said that Bruce Moore had said to call you. And I said, oh my, I wonder what that's about. Well, I called him, and he said, well, you still want those tickets? And I said, well, I know what you're talking about, of course. So we jumped in the car and made it to St. Louis in time to see the first game of the 1968 World Series. Mike was with us then, except he was not. He hadn't been born yet, but he was a complicating feature of the trip. But in any event, we were there by pure happenstance and a loose conversation from earlier. Got to see Bob Gibson set the Major League strikeout record against the Tigers. And then, of course, the Cardinals went on to lose the series. But anyway, it was fun while it lasted. So the Cardinals were big, and we got to see them, and we saw them quite a few times after that. Now, I'm going to just fast forward here a little bit because I want to stay local here. The teams that I can talk about, beside the Hawks, and of course I eventually, like everybody else that had baseball in their blood, they eventually signed up with the Lincoln Hawks. And of course, I think Junior had stepped down by then, but there were still some. And we did get to go to Wichita on occasion when I was playing, and those were great times. But when back to the Cardinals, I do want to mention this because I brought a little memorabilia here that you can look at. It's kind of important. It's not as important as Satchel Paige, although probably equal in notoriety. Stan Musial was my hero. Of course, he was the top Cardinal, and the world turned on Stan Musial. So one time when my folks and I think my sister was along, went to St. Louis, Dad decided we'd go out to Stan's restaurant, which we did. And Stan was there that day, and we pretty well knew that because some teammates, the manager, Eddie Stanky was the manager at the time, and there were several Cardinals walked in, and of course my dad was never shy about saying something, and he said to manager Eddie Stanky, he said, well, if he wouldn't let me get the head of the line to eat, I'd bench him. So that was joking, of course. But anyway, on that occasion, I got up the nerve to go back to Stan's office, and he was kind enough to autograph a picture to Dan from Stan Musial. It's right here. It's had a treasured place and survived all the years since 1968. And I didn't even remember this, but in kind of preparing, I see Eddie Stanky turned it around and signed the back of it. Somehow, I don't know how he did it, but it got signed. Maybe that's a separate sheet, but I got Eddie Stanky's and Stan Musial. When I was in the Navy, Junior was in the Navy, I was in the Navy. I carried my baseball interest to the Navy, and I got to be in charge of the ship's baseball team. And I was a playing manager. That was a great experience because we got to play some wonderful. My ship was home ported in Yokosuka, Japan, and we never left South Pacific, and we hit a lot of ports that had baseball teams. And you know, I've already said the Japanese were well into baseball by that time. Korea, we had baseball teams, so that was a great experience, and I was very fortunate that I got to continue my playing and my baseball interest while I spent 3 years plus on active duty in the Navy. Likewise, I did have a college year when I went to Holland, and I had a teacher there who was a baseball fan, a Chinese gentleman, and he would take me into Amsterdam every Saturday to play on a club team. They don't have, it's not like here, and maybe we could learn something from that. You know, our colleges and our schools are sports. I'm not complaining about that. I was part of it. But the European teams are all club teams. They don't play with a school affiliation. They have a club team. And I got to be on an Amsterdam baseball club team, and that was a wonderful experience and one that I will never forget. I've got a few more stories, and then we'll get on to the question. I think we really want to avoid these questions, don't we, fellas? Maybe if I talk long enough, we won't have to answer any questions. I not only played, of course, for the Hawks, and I played for Washburn. We started baseball my sophomore year, so I played on the Washburn team, and here, that's what this is all about. That's my Washburn cap. And that was a great experience. It was, my best year was 57. I went to Holland in 58, and when I got back in 59, I didn't have near the good success as I had in 57, but I was hoping that my friend Joe Ortiz would be here, because I have a story that involves him. It turns out that Joe, we're about the same age. Joe played for College of Emporia, and we played them doubleheader once at Washburn, and I remember Joe being on that team. Well, we had a Washburn reunion here a few years ago, and somebody had compiled all the statistics and everything. And I'm not going to get into statistics in Joe's absence, but I looked up that C of E game, and sure enough, it was Joe Ortiz. So baseball has broadened a lot of my experience, because here I didn't have any clue that he would become a fast friend that he is now, that many years later. But Joe caught and I think played third base for College of Emporia at the same time that I was playing for Washburn. While I'm talking about Joe, I'm going to relate another incident. Joe, as you know, those of you that know him, has made umpiring and refereeing a big part of his life. And in the mid-60s, well, we came back here in 68, so this must have been maybe 69 or 70. Joe and Dean Collins, who was his umpiring partner, came by my house and said, "Hey, hop in, we need a third umpire." And I said, well, and I had been umpiring locally. I didn't do any big-time umpiring like they did, but I said, oh, well, okay, and they lured me in, and we headed off to Lindsburg. The game was being played in Lindsburg, between Bethany and Westland. And of course, the Westland coach was, some of you guys in the back there tell me, I can't think of his name right now, Cochran. Yeah, Ken Cochran, he was the basketball coach, but he also managed the baseball team. He ran the baseball program. Yeah, here's a former broadcaster now. When is your turn with this?
Oh, when you're done, I got a couple things, and then we
okay, good. Well, he's got a lot of stories to tell, because he broadcast a lot of important games. But anyway, Bethany and Westland were locked into a good game, and I was umpiring down the first baseline. And it just happened, of course, I had my sister in Lindsburg. She had twin daughters. They were all there. Everybody in my family was there to watch Uncle Dan umpire. Well, somebody, and I can't remember the details, but somebody, and I think it was a Bethany player, that hit a long ball out into right field, and there was kind of a rickety snow fence out there. You would expect better, at that level. But anyway, the fates got even with me. I thought that ball did not hit the fence, or would not have hit the fence, even if it had been upright, and I called it a ground rule double. Well, you can imagine how that felt set with the Bethany fans, many of which were my family. So as it turned out, they were, Cochran, if anybody knew him, you know how he was pleased because it was a double, not a home run. But the Bethany coach was all over me, up one side and down the other. And I don't think I threw him out. But anyway, I looked up in the stands and my sister had left. My twin nieces had left. Umpiring wasn't always kind to me, but I still did it. That's just a baseball experience that I wanted to share with you. I've got lots of other things here. Maybe they'll come up on the question and answer, but I know I've left some of the important people out. Lovey Hall, who was mentioned, Lovey came back from the war, and he was a splendid ball player and probably could have gotten into, in fact, I think he may have gotten into the minor leagues for a while. But anyway, he bought my grandpa's hardware store. My granddad, my mother's father, was from Salina, but he came here and courted a local girl, Alice Dunton, who was born here. She goes all the way back in Lincoln history. And they ran the hardware store, and I grew up spending a lot of time in that hardware store. But thanks to that sale by Bill Dodds to Laverne Hall, we got a lot more baseball in Lincoln. Lovey Hall was Mr. Baseball of Lincoln, Kansas. I'm sorry if I've offended somebody or somebody's relative, but there wasn't. I see the Songer boys here nodding their heads, so I feel it's verified. And he got me my first mitt, and he broke it in. He was always the place you went if you had a baseball something. And he played with Junior, of course, and played even beyond. In fact, he was still playing with the Hawks when I started playing, and some of my contemporaries. So he played to the bitter end, and of course he still, and he helped so many other teams. He managed the Cookie team, I know. Paul Flaherty was another one that needs to be mentioned. They went from their playing days, Paul played for the Hawks too, to managing the youth teams, so they contributed in many ways. But I'm about to give this up. I know I'm taking more than my share of time, but we hope that this will inspire through your efforts, Bud, to kind of think about the old days in baseball. We've got some good teams going now, and I hope that we can keep baseball alive in Lincoln, County, Kansas.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And you can see that one Denmark uniform there in the corner, that's Junior's. When he was, I don't know when that was, back in the 40s, I suppose, or...
Well, yeah.
Yeah, would have been.
Early 40s, yeah.
Dan mentioned a couple things. One story I'll tell about broadcasting. I was in McPherson and broadcasting their teams down there. And in the summer, the Hayes Larks came over to play. And they had a bunch of names that I could not pronounce. And the one name I remember that I didn't pronounce correctly was Pujols. And this would have been probably 95, 94, somewhere back in there. And he lived with a family in Kansas City, and that family came to Hayes, and the father coached the Hayes Larks, and so Albert Pujols went with him. And I didn't know for many years what a great player he was going to become, and he's always been one of my favorites. And I'm just opposite of you, Dan. My team was the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I played shortstop for the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's a fact. And of course that was Brooklyn, Iowa. a town about the size of Lincoln, in my grade school days, and I think I was in third grade when they started Little League there. We had 4 teams, the Yankees, the Cardinals, the Cubs, and the Dodgers. And I got selected onto the Dodgers team, so I've been a lifelong fan of the Dodgers again until the Royals came, and we're going through those down years again with the Royals.
We both changed.
Yeah, we both changed.
Yeah, we're both Royal fans.
Both Royals fans. And when I was in the service in the DMZ in Korea, we didn't play baseball, it was fast pitch softball. And our team won the 2nd Division championship and then took 3rd in all of 8th Army. And I wasn't playing, I was the coach. So that tells you I was a reasonably good athlete, but I wasn't good enough to be on that team, so I coached them. Anyway, do we have any questions anybody wants to ask these gentlemen, or any stories of your own? Mm-hmm.
My question is for Dan. At how many Major League ballparks have you attended games? And before you answer, I have to give my one name, fame, glory story. On the baseball summer trips that I used to go on, they were anywhere from 10 to 14 days long, but we attended a minor league game of the Dodgers, I believe it was, the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes. And I was selected to throw out the first pitch. It was, as Clark Sanders said, a little outside. It was a hell of a long ways outside. And I think it bounced a long, long way. But gee, that was fun. So back to my question to Dan.
Okay, Dan, how many Major League ballparks have you been in?
Well, I'm going to turn this around too, because Joyce has been, I went on 6 trips. Lynn went 3 times or 4 times. Joyce went every time. So if you find out how many ballparks Joyce has been in, divided by, 3, and that's how many it's been. I enjoyed the Clark Sanders baseball trips that you may have heard about. If anybody listens to KSAL, you'll hear about them, and they are great trips, and we've enjoyed it, but we've pretty much retired, I think, from them. But I can't give you a good number. How many have you been on? How many ballparks have you seen, Joyce?
I've been to every one, even Montreal, when they were still going.
I was on that one. We were
And
on that
except
one.
Montreal, which I was only to once, I've been to all the others at least twice, many of them 4 or 5 times.
Well, that's great.
I went on 14 of Clark's trips.
Good. Well, that's one close to a record. Anyway, we were on that Montreal, and last year there was a Montreal team.
And they're now the Washington Nationals, aren't they?
Correct.
I believe the Expos are now the Washington
They
Nationals.
did go from there to the.
Other questions or stories anybody has? Okay, Herb?
I just have to reiterate what Dan was saying about Lovey Hall. And I know he was a great baseball player, but he was one heck of a baseball guy. He was one heck of a guy. I mean, and if any kid that could walk on up through high school, if you wanted to buy a piece of baseball equipment, there was no place to go, Lovey Hall's hardware store. And you went in there, but you didn't just buy it because Lovey wouldn't sell you anything just to be selling you something. He'd set you down and he'd look at your hand, glove, he'd say, now what position are you going to be playing, and the length of your fingers, and I mean, the whole ball of wax. And that included cleats. There were cleats back then, they weren't rubber tennis shoes, and baseball bats, Everybody wanted a bigger bat than they should have. Lovey would always say, don't get too big a bat, get a bat you can swing, on and on. But you learned a lot about baseball before you bought your piece of equipment. And you learned a lot about life. So I really learned, 2 guys I really learned a heck of a lot about baseball and life was Lovey Hall and Bally Flaherty, Paul Flaherty. who were both really involved in the youth movement of baseball in Lincoln, Kansas for a long, long time.
Both local treasures.
I wanted to see if Junior could comment on this. I've heard his story being on the ship and going to Yankees games when you were in port. You said that servicemen could get into the games for 50 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that interesting.
You can't get anything for 50 cents at a ballpark now.
I got another little story I'd like to tell you. Bud, oh my gosh.
It's getting harder to do that.
Anyway, that one time we went to Wichita, and I was always the first batter. Always the leadoff batter. And I stepped up to that plate, and that old umpire stepped back and stepped on that air thing, blowed all the dirt off of the plate. And it just scared the tar out of them. They caught me about the time I got to the dugout. I thought it was all over. But anyway, that's how dumb some people, you know, I didn't know. God, we had old discs for Denmark, we didn't have them. You know. And here they had the air compressor. You stepped back, stepped on that thing.
Yeah, Junior, I was, did you guys back in, when you were young, have trouble finding like equipment, like bats and balls and gloves? Were they readily available to you back then?
God, we only had 3, 4 bats and probably 2, 3 balls. You know, no, we could always get stuff. We all go, he had a, if you break a bat, he'd have a new one there the next game, you know. And I liked it, you know, I didn't like a big old club like that. But I liked the smaller bat. But anyway, I got another story to tell you. This old Hap Dumont, probably none of you know him. But anyway, old Harry Woody and him was good friends. And whenever we'd go to Wichita, Harry would say, we got to go get Hap a fish, a big catfish. He liked catfish, Saline River catfish. So anyway, old John and the Woody boys and me, we went down to the river where Elkhorn goes into the river. Strip your clothes off, go hunting. Get down in them holes. I got old Freddie, found a big one. So we got a big old blanket, and we got him around him.
That's called noodling.
Well, whatever it was. But anyway, we come out of there. It took 3 of us to get that. God, I don't know how big a thing he was. We put him in, wrapped him up in blankets and took him to Wichita. We drove up to the stadium, and old Hap was waiting. Put that big old fish out and put it in his old van. And I thought that was really something, you know. But anyway, we got to be pretty good friends with old Hap Dumont. I really enjoyed him. He was a good old fella. Okay.
They named the stadium after him too. Dumont. That was part of the name of the stadium.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in Wichita.
The juniors reminded me that I left somebody out that I did want to mention. My generation was on the charter, was a charter member of the K-18 baseball program. K-18 started in Lucas with a gentleman by the name of Al Ziegler. Al Ziegler, and he gets credit for and deserves credit for creating the K-18 Baseball Association and staying with it, and it's still that today. The same teams that with additional teams have come on. But I remember we started that league, and Mr. Ziegler was really the father of it. Many of our dads got involved that were doing that, but in final analysis, Al's widow, Al died, and his widow spent her last days here in Lincoln at the nursing home. And I used to go out and see her, and we would talk about the baseball days. And so that's a touch that carries on. The K-team are right before we have the Pee-wees, and we had the midgets, and then we had the K-team, which were the cookies. and it lives on yet today in the area.
In the mid-'80s, we lived, get out of the camera, we lived in Smith County, and I coached a K-18 team out of Gaylord. I had our oldest son, our youngest son, and our youngest daughter all on the same team, so that we could come up with 9 players to play. But got to travel and play the K-18 teams, and it was kind of fun. They were pretty well known back then. Anything else, anybody? Okay. She's prettier, so we'll ask the question here first.
These girls' uniforms over there, this one of them was my aunt's, and I remember she always used to tell about my grandpa making a homemade bat. They used a homemade bat because it was in the 30s and nobody had anything. So after she died, we brought her uniform, and that's one of her uniforms.
Yeah, you talk about homemade bats. That's what I was holding up here. This was made of ash wood by Art Mantle, and it was used by him, donated by Stanley Crawford. But so that's a homemade bat out of ash wood, and not terribly heavy and not terribly light. So I wouldn't use it. Okay, let's see. We had somebody else with a question here. Yes.
I have to tell my story. I think maybe Doug Levine could tell it. I've heard roundabout that maybe he knows part of this story, but it seems like my dad told it, but he told it for us kids, so it was kind of lightened up a little, or, you know, he didn't want to. Tell us who you are. Oh, I'm Alan Offenberg, by the way, and my dad was Melvin. And I wouldn't bring this up, but my dad passed away in February, and my uncle Clarence was here from Arizona, and he told this story from his point of view, which was different than what my dad's point of view was. But it seems like, and I don't know, was it Elkhorn team, or do you know, Doug, whether it was where they went to Bushton, or? Well, this was a different story then. And I think it was the Elkhorn guys, because they had to go to Bushton or Geneseo and play a game. And so my grandfather, Offenberg, put the stock racks on the truck. Same story, kind of. Anyway, and hauled them to wherever this game was, whether it was Victoria or wherever it was. But my Uncle Clarence was 10 years younger than my dad, so he was probably, I'm guessing, 8 or 10 years old, and he begged my grandfather, I have to go along, I have to go along. So he went along on this trip, and they went, and when they got there, the opposing team, or that town, was giving away a case of beer for every home run that was hit. And the Elkhorn boys teed off on that. And they all got these cases of beer and headed home. And my Uncle Clarence said he probably learned things that a boy that age shouldn't see or whatever, but they made a fairly quick trip out, but on the way back, whenever they had to stop for to relieve themselves, they'd bang on the hood, and he said it took an awful long time to get home. So, that's my story.
Okay. Anybody else with stories or questions? Again?
Since Junior mentioned Mr. DuPont, I assume the stadium in Wichita is named after him.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know anything about him. Can you tell me some more about him?
Well, I don't know. He's just a good fellow. I don't know.
Did he play baseball, or was he a businessman?
He was a businessman and had a lot of money.
Okay.
Built that stadium. Yeah. But anyway, let me tell you something about that Westfall bunch. You know, old Melvin and old Pickle, they's good pitchers. But I tell you what, I remember old Paul Buttonoff and Eldon Trogg hitting that ball in them trees way down, way out in left field, and you'd hear that old ball up in them old trees bouncing. Them guys could hit that ball the furthest of anybody I ever seen, them two guys. They're big and strong.
Yeah.
Okay. It was always competitive.
I played a softball game with Eldon Trout later in his years.
Oh, yeah, Eldon, he was tough.
Ron Buttonhoff, that was my dad.
Yeah, yeah.
The picture under the Lincoln Lions, clear to the right top, that was my dad, and Alan's dad's in that picture. Most of our community, but you find out how old you are sooner or later. I was at a young girl's birthday party 2 weeks ago, and I don't know how we got there, but they said something about baseball. I said, oh yeah, I remember that field at Westfall. And he said, you remember that field at Westfall? It's like, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I remember it. But I remember those fuel tanks were there, and there was a stand. And if you could retrieve a foul ball, you'd get a free pop.
Oh, yeah.
And Gray Pat never tasted as good as it did at those baseball games.
Yep.
I just want to add something. I had it on my list here and I forgot to mention it. The organizations that have been involved in Lincoln practically from day one, the Lions Club, the Lincoln Lions Club, always handled the younger kids, the cookies. And for years, Jay Cromwell, who certainly has descendants around and cousins around, ran the program. And so now, and of course the Lincoln American Legion kept that going. I got involved in that. But now everything is tied in with the rec league. So, and Ryan knows a little bit about that. He's helped out. So we've evolved throughout the years, but certainly the Lincoln Lions Club and the names that have been mentioned, Baldy Flaherty and Lovey Hall, have all been huge factors in keeping it going.
What about 1999?
Okay, 1999. See, if you trigger me, you never know what you're going to get. 1999 was the year. I guess it was the golden year of the American Legion program and the Lincoln High School. I've got a little story. This reminds me. When I was playing cookies, Gerald Woody was our manager. And he was a good one. If you can imagine, there weren't better baseball people than the Woodies. Fred, Wade, who went by John, and Gerald, three brothers. Well, Gerald was more of an educator, and he coached the team at Vesper, and he coached our cookie team. And we were winding down the season, and he came over to me one time, and he said, Dan, he says, you're going to start high school next year. What do you think of coming to Vesper? And I looked at him, and I said, oh, that'd be great. You got a ball team. Lincoln doesn't have baseball. Well, that got taken home, and it didn't fly at my dinner table. I mean, I thought it was a great idea. I hadn't figured anything out yet, what was it going to do about football or what was it going to do about academics or anything, but boy, if it had a ball team, why not? So, I was recruited, but no bonus involved, and so it fell flat. Dad, when I said that to him, I said, Gerald wants me to go to school in Vesper. One of the only times I've heard him speechless. He didn't say a word. And that's not a slam on Vesper. He just said, he didn't say anything, which I knew it wasn't going to happen. But, what were we talking about before I interrupted?
99.
Oh, 99. 99 was the year. And we had trouble keeping players together because they had the basketball camps that intervened, all the other things that schools get involved in. So we were very fortunate in 99 that Minneapolis couldn't field a team, so we got a couple of kids from Minneapolis, good ball players. And we had, of course, if I start naming them, I'll leave somebody out, Robbie Obermueller, the Gebhardt boys. There were some real good ball players in the Lincoln area. And lo and behold, we played out a Legion season and had his own tournament here in Lincoln, which got rain delayed. I mean, this was during the time I was business manager. I wasn't the field manager. Either Ernie Hager or Jim Ferris was the Legion manager that year. He gets the credit for that year. We got into, after we won the zone tournament, of course that made us eligible to go to the state tournament at Pratt. And we got there, we didn't win the state tournament, but we got third. And one of these mementos here, and I think it's this one, recognizes that the team got third at state. This is the Kansas American Legion Championship Baseball Tournament, 1999, third place. So the high school that year, our Lincoln High School, did take on baseball a few years before that, and our high school team got third in the state 2A. And most or many of the same players had the Legion success too. So that's what 99 was all about.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else with a story or a question? All right. Please take the time and look at the memorabilia we have up here. We made that one big picture of the 1948 team, and they were champions, and they got to go down to the NBC tournament in Wichita, and all their names are up there, and Junior's on there, and my wife's dad, John Sheldon's on there, so we've got a little bit of a tie to it. Lots of good memorabilia to look at, and feel free to do so. I think we still have popcorn and hot dogs and lemonade and tea, and yes ma'am.
Make sure that you sign our guest book in the back there.
Okay. Sign the guest book and mark Friday, May 31st and Saturday, June 1st on your calendar. We're going to have the 150th remembrance of the Spillman Creek Indian Raid, the last major Indian raid that took place in Kansas. The result of it was the 6 weeks later, the decimation of the dog soldiers, which were Indian outlaws, kind of like the MS-13 of today. Their own tribes wouldn't claim them and kicked them out. There were ultimately 11 settlers killed, 2 women and an infant captured, and the cavalry was able to catch the dog soldiers in northeast Colorado, rescue one of the women. The other one was killed by Chief Tallbull in his tent as the cavalry charged through. But it's going to be a great Saturday. It'll be a great day. We're going to have a review of the entire event, and then we're going to go by motor coach bus. We've got 3 buses available, and go up to Denmark where it all started, have a program of some of the incidents that took place there. Then we're going down to Vesper, which is the closest meeting place we can get to where the women ultimately were captured and some more of the carnage was applied by the Indians. And going to be a lot of good, interesting Lincoln County history, and I think you'll enjoy it. So thank you very much for coming, and take your time and mosey around. Oh, see, hustle around. Don't mosey anymore.
Nobody walk.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Where are you living at?